Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. And when you, as a dungeon master, are telling the story, right? When you're telling it with your player characters, we've talked already about the power of narrative and the power of message and the incredible importance of getting the proportions right, right? And I've said the proportion should be 1 to 9, right? Like, if there's 10 parts to your story, 1 part should be your message and 9 parts should be your narrative, right? So the narrative is the story. So let's say, you meet in a tavern and you're quested to go get the magic ring, and give it to the Baron, right? That's the narrative. Your message is, like, for instance, let's say you're an environmentalist, and in your Dungeons and Dragons game, when your characters, here's a perfect example. Your characters can defeat the monster by burning the forest to the ground, right? But if you are personally an environmentalist, in your game, you're not just going to burn the forest to the ground, right? And so your message is right there. It's part of the story, and it's all up in it, right? It's just right there. Okay, so your message, and one of my biggest complaints is that Hollywood is like 75% 75% message and 25% narrative. What I want to talk about today is the movie Black Widow, and how it shows that there are 3 axes that story revolves on. Okay, I had thought that the axes for story were narrative and message, but now, after I have seen Black Widow 2021, the new Marvel film, I realized that the story rests on 3 axes. It rests on narrative, it rests on message, and it rests on meta. Okay, and no movie I've ever seen in my life showed me the importance of meta more than Black Widow 2021. Spoilers alert for Black Widow 2021. Okay, so let's talk about meta. Okay, so we just talked about, so I explained to you what message is, and I explained to you what narrative. What is the meta of the story what would meta be in that same Dungeons and Dragons story that you are telling with your player characters? Well, here's a meta, okay? So you've been running your game for 18 months, and you have 3 players, and one of them is and they're all, and let's say they're all local to you. They live within 5 to 15 miles of your house, and they're your good friends, right? So you've been playing your game, and you guys have been running for 18 months, and you're the dungeon master, okay? And you reach a point where, so you're the dungeon master and you have 3 players, okay? You get a call, all right? And you are a big fan of an indie tabletop role-playing game that you're a huge fan of, and you just found that the creator of that game now lives in your city. By the way, this recently happened to me. I met the creator of of Index Card RPG. He moved to my city, and I met him in person. It was incredible, right? All right, that's a real note, but this story is inspired by real events. So you're running for 18 months, and your friends are there, okay? But your favorite indie game, the creator comes to town, and the creator says, "Hey, I'm spinning up a new game. I'm playtesting a new game. I know you're a fan of all the editions of my game." And, we really hit it off when we talked last. I'm inviting you into the game, okay? And that game is on the same, but the person says, I'm inviting you into the game. It's on the same night as your own game, right? Now you have a decision to make, right? You have a rock star opportunity to play to literally play with the creator of the game, but it's on the same night. And you also know that one of your player characters cannot move to another night, and that one of the other players will be so upset that you're cutting out, this other player, that your whole game will fall apart if you take this other opportunity, right? But you're also like, hey, this person moved into my area. I have an opportunity to actually impact the creation of a game. this could be a really big opportunity for me. All right. So that's the meta, right? So your story is your player characters meet in a tavern and they've been quested to find the magic ring for the Baron. That's the narrative, right? You're also an environmentalist, right? So you as the DM are going to be upset if the player characters choose to burn the entire forest to the ground. And you might even take action. You might put treants into the game to stop that from happening because your message is that people should preserve the worlds they live in, right? And you're not down with, just burning forests to the ground for minor benefits, right? So that's your message. And then your meta is you're coming to the table and you're GMing this week, but you've been asked to be in another game, and there's a 50% chance that this game will not even exist a week from now, right? Because you're going to say yes, you're going to take this huge opportunity, and the game you are running right now, right, might not even exist in a week. So you might be tempted to give a narrative ending to the story this week, just so you could, at least give your players a good ending to the story, even before that ending was planned, right? And right, that you can write an ending in 2 days, which will not be as glorious as the ending that you were going to do. But if you don't do an ending tonight, and then you take that other opportunity, that they would have played for 18 months with no ending to the campaign, right? So your meta is thick. It's just thick, right? And it is an axis that your story moves around. And I can hear you out there. You're like, no, Scott, it's all narrative. For me, the message is nothing, and the meta is nothing, right? For me, it's all story, and the story is all narrative. You are wrong, right? You are wrong, right? First of all, if you think that your game doesn't have a message, you're wrong. It has a message, right? You are a collection of opinions and a collection of cultural, milieu, okay? And all that goes directly into your game. You have a message. If you don't think you have a message, it's like me. People say, oh, well, that's a Pennsylvania accent. I'm like, what are you talking about? There's no Pennsylvania accent, right? That's not a thing, right? But somebody from, Georgia's like, oh my gosh, are you kidding? Pennsylvania accent is thick as day is long, right? So if you don't think you have a message, it's only because you don't even know what your own message is, right? If you think you don't have a message, your message is your own ignorance. You have a message. You just don't know what message you're purveying, right? And here's the other issue. If you don't think your meta is affecting your game, you are wrong. Your meta is massively affecting your game, right? Now, it's not a problem that the meta is affecting the game. It's only a problem if you don't understand the meta is affecting your game, right? And the reality is, once you recognize that meta is there and is affecting your game, then you need to do something about it. And you need to make sure that you're handling your meta correctly, right? Now, how do you handle your meta? Well, you sure as heck don't handle it the way Marvel handled the meta in Black Widow. Oh boy, wow. Okay, so what are the lessons we can learn for handling meta in our Dungeons & Dragons game that is way better than the meta was handled in Disney, by Disney in their official Marvel MCU movie, right? So, first of all, the narrative. All right, I'm going to talk about Black Widow 2021 now, and I'm going to squeeze it for the juice that we can get as Dungeon Masters. All right, so first of all, I did not want to see the Black Widow 2021 movie, and I skipped it, right? I was like, I ain't seeing this, right? And now, why did I decide not to see this movie? Well, honestly, I was very upset with Disney because of what they had done in Endgame, right? Well, actually, I was upset that they were even making Black Widow 2021 when I figured out what it was, right? So Avengers Endgame, Black Widow dies, and it doesn't matter if you die in a Marvel movie, unless you die the way Black Widow died, right? That was a permanent death, right? There was Avengers Endgame, and then there was Avengers Infinity War, right? Well, I think they were switched, Avengers Infinity War and then Avengers Endgame. Well, in Avengers Endgame, Black Widow dies for realsies. Like, she doesn't get ashed and then she's going to get brought back together with everybody else. She dies a permanent death, a sacrificial death, so that Thanos can get a Soul Stone. Okay, so she dies a very real comic book death where you ain't coming back. That's incredibly rare, and it made her character really special, right? So then they're like, hey, we're going to give you a Black Widow movie. And I'm like, wait, you're giving me a Black Widow movie after you just killed the character? And they're like, yes. And I'm like, so you're going to resurrect that character? And they're like, no, this happens 4 years, after she died. 4 years before she dies. And I was like, well, but wait, so was this shot a long time ago? And they're like, no. Scarlett Johansson will be like 6 years older than she was in the movie. Like 3 to 6 years older than the movie you just saw her die in. And I'm like, what? Like, it's just confusing and outrageous, and it's a mess. And so what is the narrative of Black Widow? It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant, right? Like, it doesn't matter what Black Widow's story is. She's literally dead. Like, none of the fight she's in this movie matter. She can't even get a scratch on her, right? And then also, anything that she does cannot even move the dial on the MCU. It can't affect the MCU at all because there's 3 movies that happen after this. So every single thing in this movie, narrative-wise, literally does not matter in the MCU at all, right? Because it's a prequel and all of the actions of everyone in it are trapped. They cannot move the needle. They cannot have any real impact because the story's already written, right? So you're like, so narrative is irrelevant. What's the message? There's a powerful message behind Black Widow, right? The Black Widow movie says, hey, female-led actioners are important, and female heroes should get their own movies. But it's late. The message is good, but it is literally, I would say, 5 years too late, right? Like, and many people have been making jokes and saying, Black Widow, the best movie of 2014, and that's 100% correct. This movie could have mattered in 2014. Now, right, a decade past when this thing should have been considered. You saying that Black Widow should get her own movie and that Black Widow matters after a character after you literally killed her and made her the only lasting death from Endgame means that your message is late, right? Narrative is irrelevant. Message is late, right? And then the meta is horrendous. The meta is just terrifying, right? What is the meta of this movie? Well, it gets even crazier. And I think the woman's name is Florence Pugh. So in the movie, you could tell, like, Scarlett Johansson's been getting more and more checked out in the MCU, like, just not really enjoying her time there and not really wanting to do these movies. And she literally just said, I have no intentions of returning to the Black Widow role, right? So you could tell that she ain't liking it, right? She's not happy. She's frustrated with this role and with this job and with being in these, she wants to do like art house movies like the Rabbit movie she did with Taika Waititi, right, where she plays somebody in Germany in a period piece, right? And so she's very frustrated, right? So the meta is that the MCU is in tatters, right? They've had the most successful run of films in the history of humanity, and right now there's a battle for the MCU that's happening in Disney. And that battle is, do we continue with the MCU and make Phase 4 just a continuation, and we dump truckloads of money to the real actors that have built the MCU and just pay them hundreds of millions of dollars each and hope that we can get the money back on the movies? Or do we wipe the board, keep the Avengers as the main focus, and replace them all? Or do we forget the Avengers exist and realize we just bought X-Men and build an X-Men series? And there is a daggers out battle that is raging right now, right? And so that's a big thing, is seeing what you're going to do. So the meta is so thick, and there's just no room to move, right? So how do you improve on this in your Dungeons & Dragons game, right? Well, first of all, make your narrative matter. Don't ever tell a prequel story, right? Prequels are for cowards. Know this as a dungeon master, right? Okay. Your message, keep it to 1/10 of your content, and then it doesn't even matter what you say. The people who will be impressed by your message and can be moved by your message, let them be moved by it, right? But if it's only 10%, the people who don't care about your message and are there for the narrative can enjoy the narrative because the proportions are correct, right? And I'll tell you right now, that's not what Disney's doing. Man, Disney is like 50% message, 50% narrative. They got the proportion wrong, right? And it doesn't even matter if your message is right or wrong. You can have the right message, but if your proportions aren't right, you're going to have a bad narrative, okay? And then last, your meta. You need to understand it and you need to control it, right? And that's the issue is I don't think Disney understands their meta, and they certainly aren't controlling their meta, right? So you as a dungeon master, you have to understand your meta and you have to control your meta. All that's my opinion. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.